Okay, so I got a bolt broke off tonight. I actually broke a bolt off in that car there. We're putting a 2.4 in that car there, and the new engine that we got, I pulled the manifold off of that, and that had a broken bolt. Same as the old manifold has a couple multiple broken bolts, but the old one has a broken bolt in this corner over here and in the middle, and I believe that's it. So the one that's in that corner over here is the one that I took out earlier out of that engine that's going in the car there. That engine's got 30,000 miles on it. So I'm going to go ahead. I didn't make a video on that. These ones that are in here, the one is actually real simple to get out. I'm not even going to bother with that one. And then I'll show you how to get out the one in the middle with using the welder. So let's go do that. Okay, so we see the one in the corner there is actually broken out a ways out. That would be real easy. Put a nut on there, weld it on, you could get it right out. This one is broken off flush, which isn't too bad either. The one that I did this on the other engine, that one there was actually broke off about 1/8 of an inch down into that hole. So I had to build it up. It was a little bit tougher, but I'm going to go ahead and get this one out. So the first thing I like to do, this one's not such a big deal, but I usually take a Dremel tool with a burr bit on it, and I'll chamfer back the edges slightly or clean the end of it up so we get a good weld on it. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then we'll take usually 3/8 nuts for all the Ford manifolds. For these manifolds, for most of them, you can usually get away with 3/8 nuts. Most of the Chevys have that. So, okay, we'll go ahead. I'll set you up here. Okay. Oh, get the die grinder. That hole slightly. Like I said, it's not much on this engine because of the fact that it's sticking out. It's almost flush there. So the deeper in it is, the more you might have to chamfer that hole back so you make sure your weld doesn't impede the edge of that hole. It'll come out a lot easier. So the welder, I'm using 110 volt MIG on this one. I've done, I think last year I did some 5/8 bolts on a track chain that I had to get out. That was into a cast track links on a chain. Those I used a big 220 welder. The hotter the welder, where you can still control that weld and not burn out into what you're doing, is the best thing. So you can get some penetration in that bolt. Here, the aluminum usually comes out a little better because you're not able to penetrate that aluminum at all with the welder. So they're generally a little bit easier when you get into cast and steel. That definitely gets a little bit more challenging to get the bolts out of there. Still, in the last probably 5-6 years, I have yet to ever drill a bolt. Sometimes it takes multiple times to get them out, but I've always had luck getting them out with a welder. So. Alright, get a pair of pliers here. So you don't have to have the engine out of the car to do this, but it definitely helps. This car, I already have it out. It would be very tough in this car to do this job, but can do it. Most of the time you're doing it in the vehicle, but this is an exceptional part where I can do it outside of the vehicle. So. Alright, we'll get our nut. You gotta make sure that nut is as flat as you can get it on there. So that one's a little bit flush, so I'm gonna build that up slightly before we start. that gets a good penetration started on that bolt. This bolt was broken off due to just the flexion of that cast manifold against the aluminum. Was able to break this bolt off. So I don't believe it's corroded or too badly damaged inside of there. So then we hold that nut as smooth, as flat as we can on there. We'll burn that welder in. I like to penetrate the whole end of the bolt. At that point, you want to let it cool a little bit so that bolt will actually come down. As you heat that bolt up, it's going to expand in there, and then as it cools, it's actually going to come back down. Sometimes I've taken multiple times, heated them up, cooled them down, heated them up, cooled them down with actually some water, cooling them down to get them to expand to get out of there. If they're corroded, sometimes you'll take an air hammer on a real light setting. This one's turned down right now. You can take an air hammer, tap on the end of them. That'll loosen up some of the corrosion in there. And then I generally like to start with an open-end wrench where you can put that on an air hammer at the same time, and you can usually slightly get them to start turning, sometimes working back and forth. The other thing I've used, impact wrench on a real low setting. You can just set there and let them go on a real low impact, and they'll eventually vibrate out. So that's cooled off. It doesn't take long. That aluminum disperses the heat so quickly. So we'll put our wrench on there. Doesn't act like it wants to turn right now. So let's just vibrate it a little bit. Tight one. So I'm going to just vibrate it as I give it just a little tension down on it. See, it's starting to move. It might be breaking my weld, but I think it's actually turning the bolt. Yeah. So it's starting to turn the bolt there. So let's just give it a couple more little turns. Okay, so that one is pretty free now. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to switch over to a ratchet, put that on there, just real easy, turn it out of there. Come right out. Sometimes you can spray a little PB Blaster or WD-40 to penetrate oil on. That'll help a little bit. So that's coming out of there. All the heat is dispersed now. So that hole's not damaged. You can go ahead, you can get a new stud. You'll be able to thread it right in that hole. Sometimes you can run a chaser in there if you need to, but on that hole you can blow it out and run it right in there for you. So you can see that just penetrated the end of that stud slightly. The bolt's right there. It came right out of that hole, nice and clean. So worked out really well for me. So that's what I did earlier. The one earlier actually took me 2 nuts, but like I said, if you can see that one, it actually, I had to build that up almost 1/8 of an inch just to get out to the nut where I could do that. When you do this, you want to be able to make sure that nut is as flat on there as you can, because that first time that you turn that, it's going to want to dig into that edge before it starts backing out. So if it's cockeyed a little bit, it'll actually start to dig in, and sometimes you'll bind right there. Okay, like I said, I've used this on bolts from, maybe 4mm, 6mm, all the way up to last year. I think those were 5/8 in that in those track chains that I took out on the links on those. I had to take 4 of them out. They were probably 4 inches long of threads in there, broken off flush on those steel track chains. So good trick, and it can be used on, you know, just about anything. I use it all the time to take bolts out. Like I say, I don't drill any of them anymore because it's usually turns into more of a fiasco than anything. Plus, I can get into really tight spaces with that MIG welder to do this job. So, yeah, thank you.